Is there still a deed restriction on the property?
Yes.
Are you honoring that?
Yes.
In what respect?
Well, when records and properties transfer, we have to be very mindful of what the Rockefeller family's intent is, and we will continue. We're actually doing all of the due diligence and homework right now to make sure. Now, I will say, again, I am not a lawyer, number one. Number two, the three-party agreement, there is a component of the three-party agreement, meaning a representative from East Cleveland, a representative from the American Institute of Architects, and a representative from Cleveland Heights. They can also decide as it goes into it. So modifications have certainly happened since day one of the park, but we really look forward as the guide stone of this park project is to look at the A.D. Taylor plan, which is what Rockefeller originally intended the park to look like.
Deed restricting public information.
The deed restrictions would have to go through the process of East Cleveland to understand. They would have that, correct?
I'm assistant director for nonprofit playing football. So we've been coming to these meetings, we're trying to figure out like, we got a permit to see if we could actually use Patterson Park to coach the kids in football. So I want to know like, how does that work?
That would be a question that he would answer, because in the negotiations for the Metro Park to take over Fordsville Park management, Patterson Park is not part of it. So we would have to talk about that offline. I believe the gentleman you were with has set up a meeting with my staff.
Yeah, it was supposed to be at 3 o'clock. He was coming from work, so I was.
So, yeah, well, it wasn't 3 o'clock today, but we'll get it on the calendar. We'll schedule. It's not something Mr. Zimmerman would answer. I have a question. If
There's one more, I think. That
once the park come under your control, does the city of East Cleveland lose with this?
So the best way I can answer that is that the park is entrusted to the public realm, meaning it has been a public park for more than 100 years. Historically, when the Cleveland Metro Parks comes in to manage, we run the day-to-day. So if there's an issue with the faucet not working, the call would come to Cleveland Metro Parks. If it's a work on a permit for a field for that particular park, that would come to Metro Parks. Capital improvements go through Metro Parks. So essentially, we will be running the park on behalf of East Cleveland.
So I cannot fathom, maybe you can help. I know the park is given to us by Rockefeller. So will that have any impact as to allowing you to operate the park?
No.
Is the bridge staying?
What?
So before I get into, I want to be very clear. Before I get into any specifics about historic things we want to preserve. So that's what I can tell you, number one. Number two, our goal is to work with the residents before we have a preconceived notion of what should or should not. And we've done that very, very strategically. So each one of you will have the opportunity to work with our team to have those levels of conversation. So to get down into levels of specificity about things as we're working through this is probably a bit premature, but in general, historic structures, we like history and the preservation. Yes.
I just want to say, I'm excited about what we're doing with Metro. From my knowledge, from my reading, Metro is one of the best in the country. This partnership is way overdue, and I wish you well, and we're looking forward to working with you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, my greatest concern, glad that this positive initiative. My greatest concern is the current athletic division we have for these things. If you guys need resolution has to pass. It's not gonna happen with these people. When I came in here, I was threatened by these people who sit on city council. There's no way that these positive, uplifting initiatives that we must have in place, they can't go forward when we have such a divided council that is trying to unseat the mayor. He's the one partnering with you guys. So we need to know, when is this chaos on the city council going to be resolved so we can have a East Cleveland that all the residents can get a part of.
I thank you for that statement. Again, that's not some Brian Zimmerman of the Metro Park.
He needs to know.
But that's a true statement,
He
and
needs to
I
know.
thank you for that. We are, and the residents are working to resolve that. So Brian, before you go, if you could talk a little bit about the high rise that is up there.
I think, to be very clear, we understand political ebb and flows, but I will tell you, parks are the great equalizers, and parks are everything that somebody should get behind. And so whether you're an elected official doing your duty as an elected official, or if you're a resident of the park, this should matter to you and your voices should be heard. So that's the statement I will make there. Number two, the question the mayor asked, about the terrace. One of the things I talked to the mayor when I first, well, we've talked many times, but one of the latest conversations was, what are we going to do with that? And so we've worked on asbestos, we've worked on the abatement, we've worked on a number of different projects to work on taking down the Terrace Avenue high-rise building. So we will continue to work forward on that as well as the gateway to the park. I don't want to go over my time.
All right.
Thank you. Mayor, thank you.
You're gonna get a demolition for that, Terrence.
Not soon enough. On the record.
We could give Mr. Brian Zimmer another round of applause. So in the introduction, I did fail to mention, and we do have copies of that article available. Metro Parks was voted the #1 park management system in the country. And that was from a Cranes magazine article that we actually mailed it door to door. But if there's anyone who would like a copy of it, we have a couple upstairs and I will go get it. And anyone want a copy of that? One, I'll have my staff bring a couple down. I wanted to mention a couple just tidbits for those of you who haven't heard it. And for those of you who have, please just bear with us. So yes, we are looking to take down the high rise across the street. Yes, the phase 1, phase 2 has been completed. Yes, thank you. Yes. I'd like to thank our partners over at the Ohio EPA for conducting those surveys. They did find asbestos, they did find lead. Now we're just sitting around praying that the financing comes down to take that building down and vacate the street. The idea is to extend the park presence, right? So that becomes more of a walking park. And for those of you who've been around, the lawn bowling is behind that apartment building. And it's a beautiful Sunday experience in the summer just to be back there. We have formed a parks committee just to talk and kind of throw things out there that the residents would want to see, would want to know that's included with this. Those of you know Renee Kendall, she is heading that up. So if you wanted to be a part of that, reach out to her at 681-2211. And again, the Shaw High alumni, right? From day one, that weekend has been secured. In fact, I've asked for first right of refusal for the entire week leading up to that. I know many of my classmates, they plan their vacation from work around the all class, and that's their only vacation. is to come back to East Cleveland, right? And we'll talk about the 80s, which is what we do, right? I want to read something, and I'm glad Nate gave this to me. As you know, many of you were at the library for the Black Wall Street presentation, and I dedicated it to Nate, as it was a bad joke in which Nate actually got me to understand the significance of doing Black history facts. So I want to read this proclamation in honor of Black History Month. Recipient awarded to Councilman Nathaniel Martin. Whereas as part of Black History Month, Mayor Brandon L. King pauses to honor Councilman Nathaniel Martin to receive the first City of East Cleveland Black Wall Street Black History Recipient Award. Councilman Nathaniel Martin officially introduced in recognizing the month of February as an annual Black History Month that highlights the history, culture, and contributions of Black Americans every month of February. And now, let it be resolved that Saturday, February 11th, 2023 is hereby declared to be Black Wall Street Black History Day in the city of East Cleveland. Thank you, Nathaniel Martin. Thank you for your service and all the times that you've done this. Yes. For those of you who missed Black Wall Street, in partnership with the East Cleveland Public Library, we are trying to bring it back. I believe it's Juneteenth. They would like to have it here. And so that you don't get misdirected by the name Black Wall Street, it is a story of hope, of working together, and of rebuilding. And that is where we're at. That's why it is significant for this city. Okay, thank you. So without further ado, I'd like to bring in Doug McCullough to talk about fiber. Doug.
Good afternoon. It's a real pleasure to be able to stand in front of you, and it's an honor to speak before a community in a moment of its democracy with feedback and information. Unfortunately, I have the task of talking to you about technology, so I'm going to ask you to stick with me. I'm going to try and hit you right in the middle. I don't want to talk above you, and I don't want to talk below you, so I'm just going to talk, and we'll have some time for questions at the end. All right? City is exploring options for making broadband internet service more available, accessible, and affordable to East Cleveland residents. Many East Cleveland residents have access to internet service, but for many residents, speeds may be lower than in other communities, choice may be limited, quality of service and customer service may be less, prices may be out of reach, and community members may not be well informed about how to get, use, and benefit from high-speed internet service. This work is not complete and many details are not yet available. The city wants to open a communication so a good general understanding can be promoted. I volunteered to speak on the topic to place some concepts in front of you and hopefully place you in a position to consider the value of moving forward with these ideas. It may go without saying how important access to affordable, reliable, and competitive broadband internet services is. During the pandemic, many communities learned things about the internet we thought we already knew. We learned that when several people all get on the internet at once for school or work, entertainment, it reduces the bandwidth. We learned that lots of our young people couldn't attend school. Lots of our workers could not work. Lots of our elders could not get health care. So let's talk about what is broadband. Internet service is delivered over a network of a type of computer. The speed of a network is called the bandwidth, and a small band results in slower speeds. A very wide band, you don't have to worry about the presentation. It's just got pictures in there, so if you get bored of my talking, you can look at the pictures. They're just pictures. A very wide band would be called broad. That's all it means. Speeds are usually described in bits or bytes and kilobytes and megabytes and that kind of thing. For hundreds, thousands, hundreds of thousands of bits or bytes of data, what you would call a lot changes from time to time. Today, We wouldn't consider anything less than 100 megabits per second to be broadband. A popular internet service provider has a current service available that charges $49.99 for service of 300 megabits per second as the minimum bandwidth. Stick with me. The FCC has been defining broadband as 25 megabits per second. That's 25 according to the FCC, 300 according to the service that someone is offering close by. Some communities that may have one provider that offers 25 megabits per second will be considered to have adequate broadband internet service, while other communities may have access to multiple providers offering more than 10 times as much speeds for a similar price. I want to note that Wi-Fi is just a technology that delivers internet service over a wireless network. Fiber is a technology that delivers over a fiber optic cable network. And it's important to note, as the need for higher speeds grows in the future, services provided on fiber optic networks will be most likely to be upgradable, updatable, and sustainable. So communities that have fiber optic networks will be easiest to serve, lowest priced, highest speeds, and quality. Access to many things is becoming dependent on broadband. Access to healthcare, transportation, customer service lines, school, classes, even coming to local government meetings is becoming dependent on your internet service. Also, even though you may not believe you use the internet that much, your devices are using the internet even when you aren't using them. So an Apple Watch or some TVs are all continuing to use the internet even when you're not watching it happen. I've worked in technology, in state government, local government, and the private sector for over 20 years. Most recently as the Chief Information Officer for the city of Dublin, Ohio, on the northwest corner of Columbus. Dublin has a long history of broadband internet service with one of the first municipal fiber networks in the state. The city has used its fiber optic network for economic development, education, smart city, and winning many awards for using the technology. As part of what we've been doing in Central Ohio, I have engaged with communities in every region of Ohio, gathering lessons, ideas, and experience from peers throughout the state. I have direct experience in how to develop these networks, why to do it, and how to use them to create long-term benefits to the communities that have them. It's important to know that communities all over the country, actually all over the world, are looking to change how their residents get access to broadband internet services. The big American Rescue Plan, or ARPA, money that the federal government established was intended to make a big statement about how necessary it is for communities, cities in particular, to make investments in internet services. Internet service is not spread evenly or equally to every Ohio community. We all know that. Some communities have enjoyed this resource for decades, while others have not. There's a growing agreement among Ohio communities in particular, both those that have access and those that do not, that cities must play a role in their broadband destiny. Companies that provide the services may or may not come to East Cleveland and provide service to all of its residents. They may claim they will, they may promise to do it, but they're not required to. So if they change their mind or only provide service to the neighborhoods that are most profitable to them, there's really nothing you can do about that. Companies choose where they are going to provide services based on the competition that is there, the cost of building a network to an area, and the long-term profit they can make by including an area. Cities can influence a provider's choice of where to serve by changing the economics of serving in an area. Cities that reduce the cost of reaching an area by building a network to hard to reach or less profitable areas make those areas profitable. They change the competitive landscape. What you want is multiple service providers, providing the highest bandwidth services at the lowest prices to all of East Cleveland's residents. You want those bandwidth offerings to go up year after year into the future. You want those costs to remain steady or go down. and you want residents of every East Cleveland neighborhood to get access to the same prices and quality of service as any other East Cleveland neighborhood and any neighborhood in Cleveland, Dublin, Shaker Heights, Columbus, or Cincinnati. You can expect that some providers may come to offer new service, lower prices on existing services. You should be ready for that and ask yourself if that were going to happen if you had not been talking about this. And also, will the new services cover every neighborhood and residents, or just the most profitable? And also, what's to stop them from stopping service? I hope that you will think about what can happen in East Cleveland, how what can happen in East Cleveland influences, if East Cleveland influences what gets built in the city. In other communities, we have achieved connections to city schools, hospitals, universities, and government facilities. We have attracted new businesses and retained existing businesses. We have attracted new residents, new talent, and made communities a desired destination. So there are some key guidelines under consideration. The city would promote a long-term network technology, fiber optics, that will be the key technology for this service for decades to come. The city would likely not become a new service provider itself. A best pathway is to invest in the infrastructure that allows another provider to provide service and negotiate the conditions under which they provide it. The city would be looking to make service available to every neighborhood. The city would gain some connections between its facilities and be in a position to build new internal services. And the city would be able to promote new economic development, business attraction, talent attraction. The high availability of internet services has been known to increase property values. So in conclusion, the city is considering options for partnering with a company who can build and run a new network that leverages existing infrastructure. The hope today was and is to introduce a lot of this information so that city council and members of the community can be thinking about the possibilities for East Cleveland of creating new opportunities for residents and businesses, and to have access to broadband internet services throughout the community for the long term. And with that, I'll take some questions. Yes.
Would your broadband be similar to what University Circle has?
So let me be clear, it's not my broadband, and I'm a consultant to the city. I am not a company that's bringing broadband here. I want to assist the city in organizing the project and getting the funds to bring it there. That being said, it would be similar to the broadband in University Circle, building a fiber optic network that connects to a number of places and then building out from there. Where that project stopped, I shouldn't say stopped, maybe they're still doing it, is it did not connect to residents, to apartment buildings, multi-dwelling units, personal homes. So it extends on infrastructure that's there to build on that. And you had another question?
Well, do you have a particular new provider in mind? Red Spectrum, do you have somebody in mind that that's one.
Well, I'll answer that. The answer is no. And the city should go through and has been going through an RFP process to ask the market to compete for this opportunity as opposed to us cherry picking one.
And so I would love it, they know this already, but I would love it if you could go back to those megabytes, you know, and all that stuff. I don't, but I'm saying that it's still a
Mhm.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, let me, without boring everyone just to tears, I will say that there's, the smallest thing is a bit, and 1,000 bits are going to make a byte, and 1,000 bytes are going to make a kilobyte. So a bit, 1,000 bits makes a byte, 1,000 bytes makes a kilobyte. I think it's 1,000 kilobytes makes a megabyte. Now you're talking about, and it's a megabyte of data. So if you see MBPS, it's megabytes per second. So if you have 1 megabyte per second internet service, you can get 1,000 megabytes in a second. Takes about that much to put that screen right there for 1 second. So if 10 seconds go by, we need 10 megabytes. This is where we say that according to the Federal Communications Commission, 25 megabytes per second is broadband. And you know, I was almost at 0 a second ago, so we just got up to 25 megabytes. After megabytes, you're going to get gigabytes. But remember, if it's less than this 1,000 thing, it can be gigabits. So 1 gigabit per second, does it hurt yet? We get 1 gigabit per second is the gold standard right now. 100 megabytes per second times 10 is a gigabit. I know that was painful, and I appreciate y'all's patience. You're welcome. Another question, sir.
Yes.
Right.
That's what we need. Stable internet system here, City Hall, that the public can access, especially for a meeting. So cover these three, you know, whatever we want to do, and have that broadband access right here.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. The challenge of this is that these things take some time to build because the fiber typically goes either under the street or runs along the poles and you connect to an internet service provider. And so ideally, this would have been done 5 years ago or 5 years before that. So it cannot be done quickly. However, the proposal, what's being proposed is that there would be fiber in this building and it would connect to police and fiber and fire. It will be close to the schools and all of these institutions so that this building would have an offensive level of internet speed, just, you know, blazing fast with fiber in the building. And that's critical not only for you as visitors, but city staff to be able to manage. So the short answer is not quickly, but a lot faster. We're closer on this project than maybe considered. Other questions? Again, I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you, and the goal here was to inform you so that it's not the first time you heard it. Hopefully you hear it again after that, and there'll be no surprises that you say, the city hasn't told me anything about this. I don't know why we're doing what we're doing or who benefits or what's going to happen. So the communication hopefully will continue, and I thank you for your time.
How's that sound, East Cleveland? Well, let's give Doug another round of applause. If I could add just a few tidbits to that. So I didn't do a good enough job, I think, in introducing Doug McCullough to you and who he is. So many of you have been following us, and certainly our council members, pardon me, because I know it's a standard here in East Cleveland that we always acknowledge the officials in the room. Councilman Nathaniel Martin, Councilwoman Bahoviak, and Councilman Mark McLean. Now, we've been talking about fiber for a number of years. You remember we applied for the EDA grant. I believe that was 19. Weren't successful in getting that. Those who remember last year, we were talking about it in high rate because we bought in some lawyers, Bricker and Eckler. And at that time, Bricker and Eckler represented 37 municipalities so far as ARPA. One of the things that we talked about back in the late summer was that we would be coming back to council to request additional funding from ARPA to go into the broadband to fiber efforts. So we will be coming to council looking for $1 million out of ARPA. It is an allowable expense. We have the legal minds that will write it up and get it over the end zone. I have to mention that the RFQ went out last year. We are in the process of finalizing the vetting of the respondents to the bid to then award it. We have $1.5 million committed, Jobs Ohio. We have money committed to the county, and unfortunately, it's been so much time, we're gonna have to go back to the county now that they changed leadership to, to freshen that up, and then of course to seek that money. But we will be asking our city council for $1 million out of ARPA. So Doug McCullough, when we looked at putting this out to bid, we know that we needed to form a team of advisors, what to include in the bid, what to look for as you vet the companies. So we reached out to a number of places, including Dublin, Ohio. And for those of you who like being entertained with internet and all things fiber, if you would look up, they have a video about Dublink, and it's fantastic what they were able to accomplish down in Dublin, Ohio. The reason I'm mentioning that, Dublin, Ohio, Fairlawn has it, and this is municipal fiber, and a number of other municipalities throughout Ohio have instituted or are trying to lay fiber to increase the competition amongst the providers. Increasing the competition will help lower the prices that residents are then charged. One of our added benefits is that businesses look for fiber in order to then locate their businesses there. They absolutely have to have fast speeds. Team Neo also on the team, as well as our advisors, OHM. And Ornet, many of you may not have heard of Ornet unless you're involved with the schools. They provide fiber to the schools. All of the institutions and organizations, governments I just mentioned, all said the same name. You want to call Doug McCullough and have him as your consultant. So that is why he's here. So thank you, Doug. Now I'd like to move the agenda, right? And before I make the introduction, I did invite some neighbors from across the street, and I will let them speak after this. Forgive me for forgetting your name, Auto Parts Plus. Auto Parts Plus, to talk about legislation that is also sitting in council that they need passed. And they will come up after this presentation to talk a little bit about that and the need for council to take action in that regard. Now I'd like to bring up Dennis Roberts from the Land Bank.
Good afternoon. How's everybody doing? All right. There we go. There you go. So first, again, Mayor, Community Council, thank you for giving me an opportunity to come before you and update you on the project area. I appreciate this opportunity for a number of reasons. I'd also like to acknowledge my colleague, partner in crime, Kamala Lewis, who is helping us at the Land Bank work with the city to get this project done. So I would also like to quickly acknowledge and thank this community, council, and administration for something that happened last year. There was an important vote that took place. It was voted for unanimously. The council, in collaboration with the administration, voted to allocate $4 million for this project. All right, and that is the best evidence of their commitment to the success of this area. And that's a big deal. Full unity. I mention that because I know that decision in the end was rooted in a couple of things: probably a little bit of insight, believing that there was an opportunity to do the right thing and they did the right thing. And a little bit of intuition, right? Because it comes down to trust. Whether you trust me as a 20-year real estate attorney, whether you trust my colleague, 20 years in community development, whether it's Gus Frangos, the president of the Land Bank, who wrote the enabling legislation that allows all these demolitions to take place really over the last 13 years in East Cleveland. Or perhaps it was none of us. It might have been the fact that Case Western Reserve, go to the next slide, please. Next one. Case Western Reserve in 2015 did a study. 5 years later, Cleveland State did a similar study. And all these studies and all these experts all concluded the same thing, that this area is the ideal area for development, and that each of us in those organizations believe that this type of development could spark further development inside the city of East Cleveland. So it's a pretty big deal. So I appreciate that. Next slide, please. For those that may be less familiar with the project at a higher level, essentially the project area is roughly 33 acres. It stretches from the west side of Lakeview, on the southerly side, Forest Hills, easterly side, Farmington, up to the railroad tracks, one big square. Everything that is colored is already owned by the county land bank or is in a municipal land bank. This has been assembled over a period of years in collaboration with the administration and council. Next slide, please. So what is the project? What is it that we plan to do? It's an obvious question. It's relatively simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. We want to create a neighborhood that's unique and inclusive, something that actually showcases the potential for this community. Secondly, we got to have something that's mixed income. Can't be all poor people, can't be all rich people, right? If you want amenities, you got to have some people that have disposable incomes and that can spend money in this community. That's a good thing. And then finally, it has to be flanked by a vibrant commercial corridor. We mentioned that because if you remember that map, 18 of those parcels are facing Euclid. And what we hope to do is attract businesses that could create jobs and amenities for the people who live here. Next slide, please. But we're guided by principle, right? We're not doing this in a vacuum. We know there's certain things we have to do in order to give us the best opportunity to be successful. First thing is scale. We know it would not work if we rehab 2 houses or we build 2 houses. It has to be something that's significant enough so you believe, and the people that we want to attract to East Cleveland believe that there's a transformation taking place. Second aspect, we recognize we're building a whole new neighborhood. So everything is designed with that in mind. The mayor spoke earlier about new streets, new lights, new sidewalk, new fiber, everything that's necessary to make you believe that you're in Shaker Heights. Just kidding. Everything that's necessary to make you believe you're in a vibrant, beautiful community like you are. Third component, of course, we want it to be unique. Why unique? Right now, you can go over to Glenville and buy a very nice house, but we want to attract people to East Cleveland. So we have to have some element, something about East Cleveland that makes it more attractive than other places in which people could move. And then finally, we have to take care of the people who have been living here for years, have an opportunity to have equity in your home. You can get a line of credit to send your grandbaby to college, or perhaps you want to sell your house and actually make money. There's nothing wrong with that, but we're aiming to do all those things at one time. Next slide, please. This is just a visual depiction of what we plan to create. Pictures, I often say, just looking at it just gives you that feel, that energy as to what it is. Next slide. Same picture from the Western perspective. Next slide, please. The money, right? A good colleague, friend of mine once said, how do you put it? Romance without finance is a nuisance, right? So project costs money. Conservatively, $122 million, right? Infrastructure costs money, buildings cost money, consultants cost money, everybody costs money. Now, what does it really mean? What's most significant about this chart, if you look at it, is $60 million to residential development, and then another $25 million in commercial development. That's roughly $70 million. That's roughly 70% of the budget has to come from private sources. What does it really mean? It means that people with money or organizations with money have to decide to invest in East Cleveland, which really means they have to decide in many cases not to invest in other places, not to take their money to Solon, South Euclid, Cleveland, or wherever. So part of what we're going to talk about today is how do we create the environment to induce that investment to come right here in the city of East Cleveland. Next slide, please. Well, before we talk about the how, we talk about the why. Why is it important? Economic development, right? Comes down to the money. Ultimately, we want to increase property values. That helps the city. We want to create tax revenue. If some people move to East Cleveland who have money, they're going to pay taxes. If there's more taxes that are paid into the city, that allows the city to enhance the city services. I think everybody in this room would agree that city services are important. So in order to do that, the city has to have money. This is a pathway toward the city creating that additional revenue stream. Not to forget the fact that we're going to create jobs, and we're already making an investment in the homes that are here, which I'll talk about momentarily. Next slide. A project of this size obviously is big, all right? So we cannot do it all at once. So we have it broken down into phases. Right now, we're in the middle of phase one. Phase one is basically characterized by 5 basic things. One, the renovation of the Mickey's building, which I'll talk about momentarily. That's happening now. We expect that to be complete by the end of the year. Number 2, we expect to put a request for proposals out on the street within the next 90 days. The idea is we want to find a developer who's willing to build that apartment building that you saw on that picture, right? We're going to do a request for proposal to induce a developer to potentially put his or her hard-earned money into East Cleveland to build some type of apartment building. Third, we got to have infrastructure in place. Again, in order to get that infrastructure, we have to have council and administration get together and pass an ordinance for that to happen. We're going to talk about that. Fourth, the land bank has to do its part. We are planning to build 4 or 5 new homes sometime next year, assuming the road goes in. We're planning to do that because we want to prove to the market that East Cleveland is a viable, prosperous opportunity for would-be developers. And then finally, we want to get other developers committed to building out the remainder of Woodlawn as part of phase one. Next slide, please. Where are we now? Next slide. So where we are now is $14 million. Essentially, with the hard work of a lot of people, including this young lady here, Kamala Lewis, we've committed $14 million, much of it which is in the bank. At a high level, you see this city, your investment of $4 million is there. Our investment, your partners, we're in for $3 million. Between the Northeast Ohio Sewer, the water company, the administration has received a grant, roughly $4 million. That's how we're going to pay for the roads. That's how we're going to pay for the water, for the sewer, for the sidewalks, what have you. Of course, the state of Ohio, the city has a wonderful relationship with the governor and the administration. They've been able to secure a $1.5 million grant for the Mickey's building. I won't read them all to you, you can see it, but I just want to highlight those pretty significant investments. Next slide, please. Beyond the money, though, there are a number of organizations in the county that are supporting this project. Everybody has their eyes on East Cleveland, very real. Just as an example, you spoke of fiber. There's an organization on that slide called PC for People. PC for People is a nonprofit organization that will help provide computers for some folks and actually train people how to use those computers. Because if you have fiber and you don't know how to use a computer, you still have a gap. The idea is that we're approaching this project not just from the standpoint of bricks and sticks, but from the standpoint of what can we do to truly help this community thrive in a challenging time. Next slide, please. But we have not forgot about the people. How many people came to the event that we had back in October down at the Mickey's building? All right, we had roughly 200 or so people. It was a very robust event, entertainment for children, for families, but more importantly, you may or may not have noticed, but we had banks there. We had banks there because we are already starting to build a pipeline for those folks who may have credit issues, who may not understand credit, who may not have a banking relationship to get them prepared for this new housing that we plan to facilitate. It wasn't really just an entertaining event. It was an event that was entertaining, but it was an event that was designed to start making connections among the people who are here and those resources, those banks that want to provide loans to people who live in this community. Next slide, please. Home repair. As I told you when I was here before, we've already raised actually $125,000 from the state of Ohio with the help of the mayor. We've taken in roughly 18 applications. We are going to start putting, I think it's 6 or 7 new roofs on a couple of the homes in the target area as soon as the weather breaks. We're ready to go. The scopes are ready. And we're looking to raise additional money and actually get additional capacity from a neighboring organization to help us roll out the renovation of certain homes within the target area the best that we can. But I mention this because we don't want you to think that it's all about bringing new people in. It is, but we also recognize the importance of taking care of the people who have been here over a number of years. Next slide, please. All right. One of the challenges that we have as a community, and I say we, because I've been coming back here since 2015. I think I'm from East Cleveland practically. But I say we, one of the challenges is that the city has very real challenges. We all know that. No need to waste each other's time with that. But it also has a perception problem because some of it isn't true. It really isn't. Some of it isn't true. And part of what we're doing to try to deal with that is we're hiring a marketing firm. We've already hired them. They're going to do things like build out a website where you can get good, solid information about the development area. All right. There are already conducted 2 focus groups with developers to ask them what is it that they need in order to invest in East Cleveland. They also conducted a focus group with potential residents. What would it take to get you to move into East Cleveland and have that real conversation? They're talking about things like logos, color schemes, perhaps renaming the area to try to change the discussion. We have to change the narrative. It can't just be all negative information that comes out of East Cleveland. There's a lot of positive things, whether it's the Martin Luther King Civic Center, whether it's the library, or whether it's just the people. The notion is that we have to bring attention to some positive aspects of their city because there really are many. Next slide, please. Finally, with regard to development, as I mentioned to you, 70% of the money for this project has to come from developers. So we have to create an environment that makes them feel comfortable, all right? But although we're gonna create that environment with your support to make them feel comfortable, we want something from them. We want them to help us to build that city of the future. But it's not just talk. When we mean build the city of the future, we're talking about sustainable practices, whether it's solar panels, whether it's EV chargers. I mean, if you're gonna build it, you're gonna build a house, you might as well build a house that's prepared, that can last for the next 30 years. So we're having those discussions with developers now and also connecting them with resources so they can get tax credits for their investment because we recognize what motivates them. Typically it's money. So we're speaking to those developers in those terms. Next slide, please. Infrastructure, I think as the mayor has alluded to, there is a lot of attention being drawn to infrastructure. Our expectation, if we're able to pass the necessary resolutions at council, is to design and start construction of Woodlawn sometime this year. But we're going to need your help in order for that to happen. Next slide, please. Finally, the Mickey's building. I think everybody here is familiar with how it looks. That's in its current condition. As it was alluded to earlier by the mayor, they are currently working. And it's impressive. Phase 1, I think, will be complete around May. Phase 2 will start the beginning of June. Again, our expectation is that this building will be complete at the end of the year. Next slide. Next slide. When complete, we haven't changed. We expect that building to look very similar to that picture. The key feature for you is not only will it be a job creating center, we hope. We have a cafe space that we've allotted just for 2 purposes. 1, to create a place where people can go and get coffee and danishes or whatever, but there's also a community space that's upstairs so people can meet and talk about the positive aspects of East Cleveland. Because one of the things we know, when people get ready to move into a community, they talk to people. And the people in this room, we're the greatest ambassadors in the end, because if everybody is down on the city, always talking about negative aspects of the city, then other people won't move here. So part of our challenge is to create spaces where people can get together and talk about the positive attributes of East Cleveland. Next slide. So what do we need? This is what it comes down to. If you've been asleep so far, now it's time to wake up. This is it. I understand it. These speeches are boring. This is what we're going to need. We need East Cleveland to be the most developer-friendly place in the state of Ohio. That's real. That's what has to happen. Because we are actively talking to these developers. They read the paper, they see the challenges, and we're saying, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. But ultimately, what they don't know is that this city is united when it comes to this development area. That's why we had a vote of $4 million just a couple months ago. So we are united. But what has to happen going forward? One, we must have commercial tax abatement. I'm going to talk to you about that. I'm going to make it very simple for you to understand because there's a lot of misunderstanding as to what it is and what it is not. Secondly, we have to have friendly zoning. Zoning are just the rules that are articulated to developers when it comes to building. We have to have zoning that allows them to develop in a way, but still protects the public interest. We can talk about that. Thirdly, got to have a planning commission. What is the planning commission? It's people who have some expertise in planning, right? Who are going to protect the interests of the city. I.e., if you got 30 blue houses, you don't want a developer to put one pink house in the middle. But at the same time, you don't want to run the developer away. So your planning commission is the entity that basically will broker a reasonable compromise between the developer and the city so you get a house. It might be light blue. You get my point. If you take nothing else from this presentation, take this away. The key part is we must have unity going forward relative to the target area. Next slide. You must have unity with regard to the target area. Thank you. So tax abatement. Don't even try to read the slide. I'm gonna make it very, very simple. So let's say there's a commercial parcel on Euclid. Everybody gets that. It's a piece of land. It's owned by the land bank, us, it's owned by the city. The grass is probably tall, right? Not if the land bank owns it. If the grass is probably tall, no one is paying taxes. Everybody knows that. No money is coming in, period. That's the state of affairs right now, all right? With tax abatement, let me give you the scenario. So if the city passes a commercial tax abatement, abatement means you don't have to pay taxes for a little while. That's what it means. You tell a developer, look, developer, if you come and purchase this land, right, you don't have to pay taxes for some period of time. Why would the developer do that? Because the developer either can go somewhere else where they pay taxes, or they come to East Cleveland where they don't pay taxes, right? They want to make money. So they're more likely to come to East Cleveland where they don't pay taxes. You say, well, why would the city do that? That sounds bad. It's good. It's good for two reasons. One, it creates two revenue streams. Number one, the way taxes are paid, you pay on the land, right? And you pay on the building. A tax abatement only applies to the building. So if the developer comes, builds a property, builds a building worth $250,000. Can I just finish this one thought? Developer comes, builds a building worth $250,000. They don't have to pay taxes on the $250,000 for a certain period of time, but the land value goes up instantly. As soon as you put a building on it, the land value goes up. That creates a revenue stream that goes into the city. Secondly, after the abatement period, let's call it 15 years, that building is taxable forever. Forever. So you get two types of revenue streams, and because you have a business there, other businesses want to come. If you decide, all right, that's not a good deal, I don't want two revenue streams, you do nothing. Well, what you have is what you have now, which is what? All right, so I think, yes, ma'am.
Bringing higher taxes to the homeowners, and also, are you saying HOA fees are coming to the residents who are presently homeowners?
Okay, I can answer all those questions. I'm gonna do it in a very succinct fashion now. Then I'm gonna finish this up, and then at the question period, I'll get into more depth if you want to hear about it. Succinctly, with regard to gentrification, because I know what you're asking, with regard to gentrification, right now, in fact, I just left a meeting with a senator, right? Just before coming here on a piece of proposed legislation that's already written. I talked about it when I was here before. It's sitting with House Representative Lou Blessing down in Cincinnati, waiting to be introduced. The net result of that legislation, in effect, is that it will freeze, property taxes for certain individuals in proximity to a development. I cannot give you all the details yet because it has to go through the legislative process. It could change. But right now there is a bill drafted. It's a very good bill. There's support for it. And the idea, once this gets introduced at the state legislature level, it becomes law. that will in effect protect people from being dislocated, all right? The second aspect to gentrification for us, it's one of the reasons that we started off and we raised money to go door to door to work on folks who live there, their homes, because part of the issue is the maintenance of the house, not just the taxes. So we have obtained grants ourselves. We're also working in collaboration with the city grants. And we're actually doing the construction ourselves to make sure that people are not dislocated. So does that answer your question enough for now or no? Because that's the answer. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, I think.
Sure.
Governing of properties, once they become vacant, upkeep of them. And since you brought up HOA, residents want to know about the $3,000 that homeowners are receiving to get repairs done to their home. But in this case, with this one resident, she said that the contractors that the city brought in to do the work did shoddy work, and she had to go and hire another construction firm, remodeling firm to come in. And when they saw the work that the contractors did that were doing these HOA repairs, they were incredulous. So how can checks and balances be inserted into that, and what can this particular resident do? I thought I would ask this question to get her issue resolved. I said, I know the mayor. You go talk to the mayor, he gonna listen. So is there a route where these residents come if they feel like they have been, screwed over by these contractors?
Let me jump in on that. So thank you for your question. What I would ask all residents in attendance, please have questions specific to the new neighborhood, Mr. Dennis Roberts, and the county land bank. That question I can answer afterwards, right? But questions as it relates to what he's talking about, he has no on that. Please, so please. And Dennis, when you get a question, if you could just repeat it for the people on Zoom. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. Well, let me say this. The council has not approved anything. I was just explaining the way tax abatement works. So when it comes time for the vote, everyone has a clear understanding as to what it is and what it is not. Councilor?
Thank you for your presentation. I'm glad that you spoke about gentrification, because we have the council and the mayor, we want to make sure that people that have been here 30, 40, 50 years come out of it.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. I have not had a discussion about putting a branch in the neighborhood, but perhaps, Kamala, have you had any discussion with any banks in regard to that?
We've had two inquiries for lots on Euclid Avenue for potential, one for a potential branch, one for a ATM drive.
And the second question, this apartment building that you're making, what are the proposed rents that they would be?
Yeah, we're not at that point yet. What we're going to do is release an RFP and ask the development community, what do you propose? The reason that we're speculating on an apartment building at this point is because we've had 2 or 3 developers approach us early on in the process and propose an apartment building. That was it. No, I understand. We're not at that point. Can I just finish up the presentation? I promise I'll take questions. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Final slide. One of the important things for us is the community engagement. So we hired a company called Seventh Hill just for the purpose of community engagement. They're doing a couple things. They're going to host a number of meetings about this project. They'll have a website where the notes will be kept, all the details about the project, all the details about the engagement with residents. So there's some accountability. It's not just a matter of me coming here quarterly, giving you a quick update in 20 minutes. You will have that constant one-to-one contact with a consultant and my colleague so we can take in your feedback. There's also some substantive outcomes out of these meetings. For example, one of the things we've been able to secure is that the cemetery down off of Forest Hill is going to open up. They're going to put some kind of decorative gate. There's going to be some kind of access. So there's going to be some public spaces that are part of this development. Through this consultant, we're going to obtain feedback from the community as to what can be there in these public spaces, some kind of passive park or things similar to you have in other cities. But the idea, there'll be some substantive critical information that we'll try to collect from each and every one of you. So with that, again, I'm here for questions, which I'll take, but I just want to urge you that in the end, in the next couple of weeks, when we come back before you, before council, before the mayor, we're going to ask for resolutions because in the end, we have to get certain things passed and we hope to have your support at that time. So thank you. Questions?
Mine is not a question.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, ma'am.
Say that every other city that has developed its neighborhood have used tax abatements to attract, businesses and new residents. So what we will be doing is completely in line with what every other city is doing to get, new residents and businesses.
Did you all hear that?
Yeah.
All right. Councilman. I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said, tax abatement. Sure. So
That you would try to, for the people on Zoom, know what the question is, and then.
So the nature of the question is the distinction between what is being called the tax cap and a tax abatement, correct? Okay. You got a comment?
I think I'd like to tackle that.
Absolutely.
So the question that was asked was what about the relationship between tax abatement and the tax cap for residents? The abatement that Dennis is talking about is commercial tax abatement. Commercial tax abatement does not affect residential value. So it's important to understand that there are two types of tax abatement. Residential tax abatement and commercial tax. And Dennis was speaking about commercial tax abatement, businesses that were built on commercial properties. Those values do not change the values of its homes. Residential tax abatement would, but residential tax abatement has already been passed for the entire city and has been for years. The legislation that is proposed is to extend and attract commercial developers to places like Euclid Avenue. So that's where there isn't actually a tie between the residential cap and the commercial.
So let me say, Pat Blahovia's question is more about the tax cap for current residents who are living in that area and who would be could be negatively impacted if you build a new neighborhood, you're raising home prices, which then you're raising the tax value, and then that impacts the resident who lives next door, the homes that we are doing home repair on. That home now will increase in value, increase in tax value, and we always talked about protecting them. That's a different tax abatement for an existing resident. There's some state laws that need to be passed, but locally, and as the law director alluded about 2 months ago in the same meeting, the city itself can pass that and cap it for residents. But there's also a state component to that as well. So I think that's the nature of her question. And there is expectation of us locally attacking that issue and working with the state for them to pass some state codes to allow for this community to enjoy caps for those who will be impacted financially by building a new neighborhood next to your house. Your house is priced at about 45. Yeah, I think that's what she's talking about. Was that what you were talking about? Okay, I'll just make sure I got it.
Thank you. Any other questions, sir?
Yeah.
My wife says no.
Possibly be in front of us so that we understand it.
No, I get it. So one of the things we're going to do, that's one of the reasons we hired a consultant to make sure there is a constant flow of communication. Number two, we're in the process of building a website. We're going to have every document, the plan, everything on that website. So in the middle of the night, if you get up and you want to think about the target area, you can go do all the research you want. But I'll be coming back periodically as invited by council and the mayor to make periodic updates.
As community residents and get more information as summer rolls out, did I see that?
The question was about community events in the summer. Kamala, maybe you could address that, please.
And there will be, we'll be distributing the information through the mayor's office. You will get it in the newsletter. You will get flyers. We'll be working with the library to put out information. And we have 2 local East Cleveland residents who have been hired as street leaders to get the word out on the street as well.
Thank you.
Let me ask you this question. Can you talk specifically about legislation needed to continue moving this forward? Not to bring this to a close, but to continue to move the project forward.
Yes, I can. There's a couple of things. One,
Can you repeat the question for the audience?
Mike asked about what is the necessary legislation that will need to be put in place in order for this project to continue. So he wants to get a sense of what that legislation is about. So first thing is going to be, we need legislation related to commercial tax abatement. We've already discussed that. All right. We need legislation related to zoning because we need friendly zoning to attract developers. We also are going to need folks with expertise appointed to the planning commission. So there's an interface between the development community and the city. And finally, we're going to need legislation related to infrastructure. In order for Woodlawn to be designed and the contract to be let, you will need a vote of council. I think everybody agrees that we want new water, new streets. In order to do that, we're going to need a vote. There are the items. Yes, sir.
Area. We need also like. I know we are accessible. And that is, we need some grocery stores. And we do not have to go. And so I think adding to the building, the new building, make it also accessible for people to go to a grocery store. That attracts people as well. You know, we need food, and we can have housing, but we got to go. Now, some people do not have housing. We have to go outside of the city now to get groceries. So I would like for you to articulate that.
The question has to do with the importance of having a grocery store in the neighborhood. There was an article that came out maybe 3 weeks ago about $100 million development just west of the development area, being led by a company out of New York called Genesis. Anybody read that article? And I read that article, and we've met with Genesis. They're going to do a significant investment in this community of housing. But what I also remember seeing when and talking to them is that they were really looking at a grocery store of some type. So I say that to say that even now, before we have a shovel in the ground, this project is actually sparking just the kind of investment and just the kind of amenity that you're speaking of. So
Can you tell them the location?
it's the county building. I don't know the exact address.
County.
Yes. Yep. Well, that's the idea. That's the idea.
I was
Yes,
just
ma'am.
gonna add that building, that was one that we were in dispute about with EP1, right? And now Genesis has that building. They're thinking about putting a store there. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know. Oh, it's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Status on that.
Well, on the legislation, he has the bill now, and it has not been introduced, right? That's the beginning of the. Well, what that does is that's the state part of the process, right? That has not been introduced. The reason I gave you the detail because I wanted you to know how serious I was, and you can follow up. Has not been introduced. We've read it. It's a good bill. We want to get introduced, and we're working behind the scenes the best that we can to get it introduced because we made that commitment to you, and it's important.
That would give us tax cash.
Correct. It has the potential to freeze property taxes for certain individuals in proximity of a development.
Okay.
Seventh Hill is a consulting firm that we hired that will help us with the community engagement process. Yes, yes, we should be looking for that name.
But let me also add, for protecting the tax values of current residents in this neighborhood, the city itself is going to take action, but we need it through legislation in order to protect people's taxes. So it's a twofold thing, what we do locally and what can be done on the state level. Right? Okay.
Ma'am. Can I answer the first two questions first? I just want to make sure I get them all. Oh, and I want to repeat the question. First is whether the school system has signed off on tax abatement. I think that was the first question. And the second question was, oh, Mickey's tenants. So no, the school has not signed off on tax abatement. We met with the superintendent for the second time on Friday to talk to him about it. He said that, he's going to go back to his board and they would consider something. Our lawyers or lawyers that are representing the city are actually drafting the language. And then I would expect that there's going to be some negotiation with the school district, with the attorneys, and then ultimately school district, council, a decision will need to be made. With regard to.
But let me say this, Dennis. The school district, the superintendent, they're very encouraged. They want to see this project happen. But they want to make sure that they protect the district, as do we. So there is the need for negotiations to ensure that the district is protected because they survive off the lion's share of property taxes, right? So it is our intent, the city's intent, our partners' intent to ensure that the district is protected, but they are extremely encouraged. They're looking to get a deal done. They want to do it as quickly as possible. So as soon as our attorneys get them over an agreement, that we can begin these negotiations to ensure that all parties are protected now and into the future, because we're asking this to go on further, not just for this one project, but into future years as this project develops across 33 acres. So they're extremely, extremely encouraged. They're looking forward to negotiating and they want to see this project get done. I didn't want to make sure that was understated.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. And you're right, Mike. And I think, from my perspective, the school is very insightful because remember that scenario I talked about with the abatement. It's 0 versus something. The school understands something is better than 0. Simply put, with regard to the Mickey's building, we do not have a current tenant in place. However, we are talking to a number of potential tenants. We're circulating a LOI, letter of intent. There have been non-disclosure documents that we've signed, so we're not at a point where we can disclose that information. But we want to get the type of company that perhaps can create jobs, maybe benefit by being in proximity to University Circle. There a question? Sure. I don't have the stats handy. I can make something available to you if my colleague would take that down. But yes, there have been at least 2 or maybe 3 focus groups, one with a couple of developers most recently, another focus group with people who potentially might move to East Cleveland and some residents from East Cleveland. They talked about a number of things. What I could do is get you some type of summary that can give you the detail if you're interested. Other questions, comments? All good? Thank you.
Let's give Dennis Robinson another round of applause. He's a regular here, so no need for another introduction. Great presentation. I'm really looking forward to this. One of the things that Dennis mentioned when he put the slide up that showed what the county land bank and the city owned combined in that area, all the blue. If you can imagine that blue, Fred, that blue goes all the way back 2010. Is that Gary Norton's first term? Yeah, it goes back to then. He and the administration have been working in tandem to take down vacant and abandoned structures, clear that land, and prepare it for redevelopment. 2010 is when they started working on a strategy to clear land, remove vacant and abandoned structures, and then assemble that land to make it attractive for redevelopment purposes. As you look at developers, especially the bigger developers, they're not coming in for what they call infills. They call them teeth, right? They're not going to put one tooth in the middle of, they'd rather put a denture in your whole mouth, so to speak, right? Yeah, so that's the purpose of that. And something like that takes time, right? And I'm glad we are where we're at now. Before we bring up Auto Parts Plus, I'd like to bring our community development director up, Melran Leach, to kind of go over what the process is and why I asked them to come here today. There's been some confusion. As you know, as I've stated, there are a number of people who put things out to purposely confuse you, right? Not true at all, just misleading, right? Like, look over here while we do nothing over here. So I wanted him to kind of explain the process and why we're here today, because their lawyer put an email to me saying that the city wasn't open for business. And I'm like, no, we're open for business every day.
all day. We're encouraging businesses, and any business that's in the city that is looking to relocate within the city, spend a considerable amount of money on the move, bringing in more jobs. We're for it. Melvin, please. Neil, before you start, I know we've been here for a while. I got some water down. Does anybody want any water? Please just raise your hands and I'll bring it to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. We at Community Development, my name is Melvin Leach. I'm the Director of Community Development for the City of East Cleveland. And we have had a good record while I've been employed here, making sure we keep our findings down. Nobody's perfect. We've had a few mistakes, but nothing major. What we did was we passed legislation in November of 2021 for our streets. Council passed it. I have a copy of that here if anybody wants to see it. So it was sponsored by Councilwoman Gowdy, and the legislation was passed for us to do the streets. We didn't do the streets in 2021 because it was in November. And if we would have did the streets then, we'd have been fighting against the asphalt plants. So we said we'd wait for the next year to go to do the streets. So then we wouldn't be rushed and we wouldn't be fighting against having the asphalt plant close on us as we did the streets. During that time, you understand that COVID happened and we had to push it back a little bit. The prices went up. That was the main reason, but it was part of a reason. So when the prices went up, we asked HUD, can we take that change with the price change and still do the streets without doing a change order? They agreed, we moved forward with the streets. As we did the streets were in much worse shape than we thought. The catch basins, we redid them. We did as much as we could to make sure that it was proper and the streets would last. However, on 3rd Street, we had only had enough money in our budget that we planned to only do a portion of the street, about 60% of the street. The residents didn't like doing 60% of the streets. They talked to their then council person, Ernest Smith, who came back to council, and we agreed to do the entire street. What that did was cause for us to have a substantial change. Anytime you have a line or line item in your budget and you go over that line item by 25%, you have to do a substantial change. And what that does is make sure that we're not just spending the money frivolously on what we want to do. We have to take it to the public. So we had a public notice, you put it in the newspaper, you post it on the website, you have a public meeting to tell everybody what you're doing and why you're doing it. That was done. We had the public meeting. There was nothing that came up. We put that legislation before council in October of last year. To date, that legislation still has not passed. And Vandra has been a very, very good contractor to us. We've had numerous contractors like Vandra and Agresta that have came on board. And when we put a bid out, those contractors bid because they know we've had a good track record of making sure the contractors have been paid. Now contractors are saying that they are fearful of working with the city. As an example, we just had our bids for our CDBG demos, and I'm getting off a little bit off track, but just to give you an example of where we're at. We had over $400,000 worth of demos that we put on the street. Only 3 contractors bid on those contracts. When you deal with CDBG funds, the government HUD funds, one of the things is open and fair competition. For us to have 3 demo contractors to bid on projects that were close to $500,000 is not good for the city. Now the contractors are telling us for our streets coming up, they don't want to bid on those projects because they are fearful of getting paid. So that's something that we're fighting against. We're going to do our best. We're going to make sure Vandra gets paid as best as possible, but we need for this legislation to be passed so it keeps the city of East Cleveland in good standing. We're about to go into our next year of 2023. our action plan. We will have a community meeting for our home art money as well. That'll be March 29th at 5:30. It's already placed on the website. You can go on there, you can join, but we need public participation. The home art money, the city of East Cleveland is due to receive $911,984. This is to address some of the homeless issues that have come up. Part of the legislation that we had for our substantial change also dealt with us with our rental assistance. We joined, like other communities in the first suburbs ring, of having Cleveland Housing Network do our rental registration, not a rental registration, but our rental assistance program. We don't have the capacity, like other communities don't have the capacity to run the program. Was it the perfect program? No, it wasn't perfect. But it did put money in the hands of East Cleveland business owners who own property and to assist those residents that needed help. The program has ended. COVID and the pandemic is coming to an end. So we want to transfer those funds into the MLK because we have work that has already been done. Contractors have did the work, but we need to pay them. But that's part of that substantial change to amend the action plan to make sure those funds can take place. If we get that done, the contractors can get paid. It'll be a beautiful recreation center for the residents to take advantage of. So those are some of the challenges that we have and why we need for legislation to be passed for us to move the city forward. Yes. Some of our minority, smaller contractors worked on the Martin Luther King Civic Center. And that legislation is stopping those contractors from getting paid. One of them is a female business enterprise who recently broke down crying because it's stopping her from moving forward. She's trying to make sure as best as possible that she can get her business ongoing, but it's stymieing her because she's put all her money, all her subs have been paid. So she's looking for payment to move her business forward.
Washington sabotage and destroy everything that you guys are working for. And we're sitting out here as a resident, and we're incredulous, and we're totally infuriated, frustrated, and then handcuffing and sabotaging everything that the mayor and you guys are doing. What's the answer? They even sabotaged the recall. So come on, help us out here.
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to address the concerned citizens here. You know, we are the employer, that council is employee. It is up to us if we're gonna run a good country, top company to stop them. We have got to come here and nail and let them do this divided arguing stuff. We as citizens have got to demand that they start working with the council, with the administration and negotiate some things to get it done. I mean, they don't have leadership, because if they have leadership, they would know the resources and things that could feel missing. We're the liaison between the city and the suburbs. We're not having this part. You are not what you need to do. Make yourself a committee of one and say, my city is going to be just like me. What kind of city would I be? And let's start demanding, because you are the boss. But right now we got clown candidates sitting up here. We're a circus and we're sitting under the big tent. Let's start making these people nail their feet to the ground. Stop letting them sit up here just talking about stuff good. They're not moving the finances. They're sitting up, don't have the qualification. They're sitting up zeroing things out that they have no knowledge of and not moving stuff. It is up to us as citizens to stop just sitting up here taking this, take charge and make them at their next meeting, make them start moving legislation.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so what exactly?
The first thing we need is for them to pass the legislation that's before them. So we need legislation passed to amend the 2019 action plan for us to fund the contractors that did the work. And we need for them to amend to pass the legislation for us to change the line item for the CDBG CV funds. I sure do. You want a copy of it? Here you go. I even highlighted it for you. Here you go.
I'll write it down. Okay.
Yeah, before you go, gentlemen here are looking for additional use. Can you talk about that process, where they're at in that process?
I got that right. So they appeared before us, before the Board of Zoning Appeals, February 9th. And the Board of Zoning Appeals approved them for a conditional use. They needed 5 variances and 1 conditional use. What that basically means is they assign, or let me go back, a church or a daycare is a conditional use in the city of East Cleveland. So basically what that says is we're allowing them to do their business without going through zoning changes. So it's not a major process, but it's a process that we have to make sure that we do. So they had 5 variances and 1 conditional use that was approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals. And who sits on the Board of Zoning Appeals is the Chief of Staff, the Chief of Fire, and the Chief of Police. And they approved this zoning change, these zoning changes, the ordinance and the conditional use. We then prepare legislation for council to approve it. And that's where it lies. My heart goes out to the owner. I've known him for a while. His son coached my son, made him the little man that he is, but we told him our hands are tied because we've done what we were supposed to do. The Board of Zoning Appeals did what they were supposed to do. It would be a great asset to the city of East Cleveland to bring in an auto parts store and do repairs. That's going to bring jobs to the city. It's a small organization that started and he wants to expand. And he wants to expand right here in the city of East Cleveland. But we are holding him up. Correct. He's done everything he's supposed to do. He's in jeopardy of losing money that he put up. This is right here, right on Euclid Avenue.
So I asked the gentleman from Auto Parts Plus to come over and see if they had any words, if they want to answer any questions. So, gentlemen, yeah. It's up to you. Feel free. Come on up, Mark.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mark Schuldhouse. I represent Auto Parts Plus. This is Robert Slaughter, the owner of the company. What we are asking for, and I actually brought along with me several sets so that you can see exactly what it is that we're talking about. But you are all familiar with the Walgreens store across the street from the City Hall. And that Walgreens store has been sitting vacant for any number of years. Mr. Slaughter has a vision for creating a new business there that will involve the creation of not only an auto parts store, but a repair facility within the building. And that repair facility is going to be significant. There's going to be 10 service bays. He's talking about adding anywhere from 25 to 30 full-time equivalent employees. He has talked with the city, with Shaw High School about establishing a auto tech apprenticeship at his store. He has put, and I'm going to, I probably shouldn't say it specifically, but I'm going to, because you all need to know. We entered into a contract to purchase this building in July of 2022. We've been doing our due diligence. We've gone through the process. We went to the Building of Zoning Appeals. We made application as was required by the city ordinance. It was approved on February 9th. It is now the 13th of March. We haven't gotten any direction as to how to proceed other than it's supposed to go to council for approval. From that point, we've been kind of stymied because nobody seems to be able to tell us what the next step is. Mr. Slaughter has $50,000 that has gone hard. And what that means in real estate terms, Dennis, how are you? In real estate terms, that means that money doesn't come back to him if he doesn't close. Okay, so he's taken the risk to be here and expand his business in the city of East Cleveland and to add all those jobs. And by the way, the purchase price on that building is over $500,000. What it's going to take to retrofit that building is probably another $500,000. So here is a man that has a business in East Cleveland.
Right next door.
Right next door, Auto Parts Plus, ready to commit $1 million, plus all the other commercial activity that's going to be created as a result of that development. And we haven't been able to get to the next step. And I have communicated with the mayor, and the mayor was kind enough to get back to us this week. We're just trying to find out what is the next step. We're not arguing about anything. We're not pointing fingers at anybody. We're simply saying we have 2 more weeks with the seller. And by the way, that seller is absentee. They are in New York. Okay, they could give a darn about the city of East Cleveland. Let's be honest. This is a man that cherishes this city and the business that he's done here, and he wants to continue to do it. But unless we get some cooperation from somebody, we can't move forward. And the seller, even though he has no other buyer, is losing confidence in our ability to get the job done. So if he says, Mr. Slaughter, I've given you enough time, I have to pull the plug. That could happen tomorrow. And that's the risk we're taking, and we can't allow that to happen. So I don't know what else to say.
Yes, great question. I see you got a chief of staff moving. He must really want to address this.
Hello,
So-
Michael.
So that we're clear, the process for the administration ended on the 9th. It was at that time, it goes to the law department. She creates the legislation and sends it down to city council. Now, it's not, it doesn't happen until city council passes legislation. So our last couple back and forth emails have been trying to convey that message.
Right.
Right. So I want you to understand the administration, 3 separate branches of government. We have done our part.
I get it completely.
Right?
Yep.
So if you say cooperation, we have cooperated. Our last leg in this, or last hurdle, is to get city council to pass it.
Correct. I understand it, and that's all we've been asking for is somebody to.
So let me say it again, right? Because I want everyone to understand this, right? The city council, this, and I think 9 or 10 other pieces of legislation are sitting in city council waiting to be acted upon. We're hoping that they pass all 9 or 10 of them, but they're in city's council purview to be acted upon, right? So the administration has done its part. On February 9th, I believe you said it was,
and it passed the BZA,
Yes, it is.
sent to the law department. She created the legislation. She sent it down to city council. City council then has to put it on the agenda, read it into the minutes, first, second, and then vote on it. It is in city council's purview to be passed. And then once it's passed, we're good to go.
And we start the process.
So. Come on up to the mic, sir.
When we started this process, a lot of people question us, why East Cleveland? They said you can go anywhere and do this project. So we said, basically, why not? We been doing business in East Cleveland, and we putting a program together for the citizens of East Cleveland to take advantage of our operation as far as special discount for the citizens. So we don't understand why the holdup and why the setback, because we're kind of up against the wall right now. And what I hear is city council is pushing back.
All you're doing is asking for a change in zoning, correct?
We're asking for a conditional use approval.
Right.
With five, there is an ordinance that has been drafted, but I don't know where it stands. It is not on the agenda for today.
No.
Not that we're aware of. And we're also asking for five variances, which primarily relate to fencing and signage and other items that are typical. Conditional use. Right. Five variances. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I would just like to add that when I go to art across the street and the one Strathmore, they all have signs that say, do not work on your car outside of the store, right? So I'm thinking, is this gonna be a place where once I buy my material, right, and get my comfort?
No, it'll be a situation where you can buy your parts at that facility to get it worked on.
And
Right. Right, this is not just gonna be a auto parts store. It's not gonna be just a service center. It's also gonna be a super tire center also. So, right.
work on it.
No, work on it,
No.
no working on it. Right.
Yes, sir.
My concern is, Mr. Mayor, you have shared with them that the administration has done its part. But the bigger issue is, they still have the problem of not getting it resolved, but the council has not done its part. So like, they just still in the middle of a battle
Right.
that's being unresolved, that's gonna cause them difficulty, or they're gonna lose their money, or they may lose the contract. And so my question is there anybody higher than council
No.
that can get them to do what they need to do? This fight been going on for a long time, and it's not only these guys. The council decide they're gonna have a meeting, they're not gonna have a meeting, they're gonna get up, they're gonna walk out. So is there any higher authority that can hold them accountable to do what they need to do for this city? Because you say, we can come out and we can get on them, they just looking at us, they ain't doing that, they just looking at us like we don't even exist. You know, we may be their bosses, but to them, we're nothing. And so there needs to be a higher entity, and if there is, it needs to go before the higher entity. So this mess can stop.
So there is no higher entity than the residents themselves, right? There are processes outlined in our charter to deal with these situations. Two of them are up for election, and residents will decide on whether or not that's the type of representation that they want. Other residents have taken upon themselves to activate other parts of the charter in order to deal with the situation. And it comes down to, what do the people want? Who do the people want? And that'll be decided, by the residents themselves. Unfortunately, the community will suffer
until action is taken. So let me jump in on that just for a second. So we all know our city council, right? This is a business I've been watching for years. I've watched how they come in. It looks like a small operation. If you drive too fast, you may miss. You go in there, you spend as much time as I do looking out the window for calmer sense. You'll see the business. Certainly when you look in the back and see all the cars, I want you to remain in East Cleveland. What my fear was, I saw an email from the then council president, Stevens. She was going down that same path. I haven't seen any documents, your blueprints, where your shoe size, where you're this, where you're that, after we had given her all of the documents. So in order to take that off the table, I sent the email out saying that we had done our part and that any questions further that you have, please direct them right to the law firm. Reason I walked over there today was to get you in front of the resident, right? Because we don't want to lose more businesses that are here. The last thing we want to do. So that's what I came over here.
Can we call the attorney general in here to step in and do something?
We can get rid of vending. We can get rid of.
Council, is it tomorrow?
That's the last thing.
Next Tuesday. Next.
To our understanding, Ms. Hemmons prepared a resolution. And she prepared it virtually on the day that the BZA approved. And it was sent up, but there was no acknowledgement of receipt. Council hasn't acknowledged that it was received. Right.
What I'll do is I'll get the printout of all legislation that has been sent down to city council. Anyone who wants to send it out to you, I'll make copies and have it present at the next council. Yes, I don't know their email. They have cards in front of their office.
So will we. Thank you.
And wait for this recall decision that's in limbo. Right now, it seems like those are only two options that we have. Concerning these council, those road council. It's getting worse every day.
I know one of the things that we campaign on is told us Townhall. And I forget Councilman Ernest Smith, former Councilman Ernest Smith, we always talk about over the town. We don't mind going. So if you show up at the council meeting and simply ask your elected officials, hey, we understand that there's Auto Parts Plus that wants to move over to Walgreens. What is the holdup in the legislation, right? Per the emails that we sent back and forth, have you provided them the additional information that they asked? Right? So they have all the information. So that when they say, oh, we don't have blueprints, we don't have this.
Yeah. I did, yeah. I got it the day you prepared it. Oh, yeah. Yeah. You got everything.
Any further questions or concerns for us to the facility, the students that are that will be coming out of Shaw? We had all the tech when we were there, right? You can't outsource fixing the car. Talk about job security. I'd like to thank you guys. Okay. That's my brother's buddy.
So outside of what was on the agenda. So at this time, we're gonna forego the rest of the stuff on the agenda and go to questions and concerns, comments of the residents. Oh, and for those of you who wanted the cranes, we did find maybe 5 or 6 of these cranes articles. Yes, you can. It is old. It talks about the land bank. Yes, you may. Huh? Yes. Oh, yeah. So we talked to them 2 weeks ago and yeah, and they said no. Yeah. Yeah. They were here a couple weeks ago and they said they can't step in that regard. It's part of the law. Yeah. Yes, but you trust me, we actually, yes, we did. Yes, we exhaust all avenues to get this done. It's good to see you. All right. Yes.